Spotlight with Stacey Pinkerton.
I'd like to welcome psychologist from the Netherlands, Bjarne Timonen. Good evening.
Good evening. Hi.
Hello. We're going to talk tonight about your specialization, which is in lifestyle and psychology. And you have been working many years. I suppose you are in the Netherlands. I took that for granted.
Yes, it's true. I worked in Sweden as well for 2 years, but I've been working mostly as a psychologist in the Netherlands, in both Amsterdam and Rotterdam.
Amsterdam and Rotterdam. Sounds like a song, actually.
Yeah, it could be. They don't go very well together usually, but yeah.
Yeah, there's a little bit of rivalry in between the cities, I take it.
Yeah, it's like Barcelona and Madrid. It mainly has to do with football, actually, because there's a big rivalry between the two clubs. But I like both cities, to be honest.
Yeah, they're very different, very interesting in their own aspect.
Yes.
Bjarne, you are working in psychology, which is a different type of psychology where you like to discuss and reverse types of somberness onto depression by lifestyle. Explain a little bit what you've been working on these many, 10 years?
Yeah, well, I've been working on a book for the last few years, which is now released, and it's translated. It would be called The Lifestyle Guide Against Somberness, I think is the translation. But I've been having a long time interest in lifestyle and how lifestyle influences your mental health. And my critique towards general psychology has always been that we focus way too much on cognition, on thoughts, trying to change the way people think. And my theory is that it's just as important to try and change the way people behave. Actually, my theory is that is even more powerful because we already think too much. So I tend to focus more on behavior in therapy than on cognition. And so I now wrote a book about all the lifestyle changes that you can apply to improve your mood if you have a mood disorder or feel slightly depressed or so. Basically, it's beneficial for everyone, I would say.
Well, let's talk about what is somberness, and then take it from there on to depression.
Yeah. So I call it somberness because clinically you would call it a mild depression, but depression has a pretty severe tone to it. Whilst I think I know a lot of people struggle with somberness and actually wonder, am I depressed or am I just somber? Am I down? What's the difference? And it's I would say it's depression is like a scale. It's very normal to feel somber sometimes. It's less normal to feel somber often, and it's obviously not normal and healthy to feel really depressed. But I tend to focus on the middle part, the people who just feel a little too somber too often, and wonder what they can do about that. Because there's a lot you can do with your lifestyle to feel better. I found out in the past few years.
Bjarne, one question about that. Does weather or change of weather have anything to do with this type of mild depression you're talking about?
Yes and no. I actually read research that mild depression is not very much influenced by weather changes, but that's the research. And if I look at my clients and if I look at myself, I do see a difference in that. I mean, you just see people being so much more happy when the sun comes out again. I mean, Holland is quite up north, and I lived in Sweden where it's even worse, where, it gets dark around 2 or 3 o'clock. And you can really tell the difference when it becomes spring and the sun comes out again in the mood of people. And obviously this is a psychological thing because human beings are attracted to the sun. But then there's a biological aspect too, in the sense that we make vitamin D when we're exposed to the sun, and vitamin D is basically an antidepressant. Like, we need vitamin D in order to have a good and happy mood.
That's a good point that you mentioned vitamin D. I have found, we are broadcasting here from southern Spain where we have a lot of sun, but still there's a huge deficiency of vitamin D, and before, doctors weren't really checking that.
Yeah, no. And it's worth checking it. So that's what the studies show, is that even, people in Spain and California have vitamin D deficiencies because we work in offices. When we're outside, we tend to wear a lot of clothes, and we tend to wear sunglasses all the time, which, it's good to wear sunglasses if you're exposed to sunlight for a long time, but it's actually good to get in some sunlight through the iris of the eye. So you need that minimum exposure of sunlight a day in order not to have a vitamin D deficiency. So it can be worthwhile to check it with your doctor, even if you live in the south of Spain, as you mentioned.
So tell us a little bit about this evidence stating that lifestyle changes work better for the population than medicinal treatments.
Yeah, so there was some pretty groundbreaking research coming out which showed that for mild depressive people, antidepressant medication actually usually doesn't work. And if it works, it probably has a placebo effect, which you could say, like, so what? Placebo effect can be pretty strong. But the downside is that there's a lot of side effects to antidepressant medication, like sexual side effects. People, tend to report that they feel kind of numb, like it suppresses emotions. So, which is all good. If you're severely depressed, like, you want your feelings to be suppressed because you feel terrible. So if you feel slightly numb when you felt depressed before, that's progress. But if you are mildly depressed, then usually, I'm not saying in every case, so it's always good to check with your doctor, check with your psychiatrist, talk about it with your psychologist, but usually that's not the answer. And usually lifestyle changes work a lot better because they have very little to no side effects, and they're very healthy too. So they have a lot of other health benefits too.
So a lifestyle change will help in somberness, but also it can reverse types of depression?
Yeah. It can, for instance, exercise. With exercise, it's been shown that the effects of it are just as strong as medicinal treatment or cognitive behavioral therapy. And if you look even further into the research, like if you combine the two, for instance, running and you go to see a therapist, that's even a stronger effect. And then very often there's no medication needed at all. So it's like running is a form of medicine itself, or, swimming or any form of exercise can be seen as a natural medicine. And actually, if you look neurobiologically, it does the same. So before we thought that SSRIs, like antidepressant medication, that the function of it was that they just boost the serotonin levels in the brain, which is often called the happy hormone. And that's true. Like we can tell from research that it does boost that neurotransmitter, but that's not the effective. That's probably not how it works. That's probably not why people feel better because of it. Why people feel better is because it boosts neuroplasticity, and that's the ability to create new connections in your brain, and to basically lay down new patterns in your brain. But exercise does the same. So exercise also boosts your neuroplasticity, especially if you combine it with talk therapy.
But how do you motivate people who come in and maybe they, as you say, there are various degrees of depression. Maybe it's just a reactive depression. Maybe they lost a loved one. Maybe it's just they've had some bad health, and it's a normal response. I find that sometimes doctors they prescribe too easily medication instead of, maybe it's because of time. I don't know what it is, but they hardly ever say, go see a psychologist or go take a running class or start up walking, whatever it is that you like. Is that something that you've noticed that is often the case?
I have to say that used to be very much the case in Holland. So in my book, I talk about my own experience with depression, which I had about 15 years ago. And basically the doctor just gave me some pills, which didn't do a lot for me because, probably wasn't depressed enough for that. And they just didn't really work for me. So I quit those medications and dove into lifestyle changes. And that has been working for me for 15 years now. So that has proved its efficacy. But that was 15 years ago. And if I look at the past 15 years, there's a lot more awareness in Dutch MDs and psychiatrists that lifestyle is very important. And, I'm talking to at a symposium for doctors soon and talking to a symposium for psychotherapists soon. So there's actually a lot of interest now, and doctors in Holland, at least now, are pretty cautious with describing medication. So there's a lot more awareness. But I think if you look worldwide, there's still this quick fix way of thinking because, the pills are cheap. They work quite fast. So it's a quick fix to treat people, but it's not a very sustainable way because, your depression doesn't go away by just taking medication. If you take medication, you should at least follow some therapies and change some thought patterns and change, most of all, behavioral patterns in order to create a lasting change. And if you don't do that, what often happens is that when people stop their medication, is that they relapse into depression. And then this whole myth comes up that, depression is just a shortage of a neurotransmitter in your brain. Yeah, that might be the case, but that's because you're living an unhealthy life. That's why you probably have this disbalance in your brain. So that can all be explained through lifestyle medicine too. Why people have a disbalance in their brains, neurotransmitters.
Bjarne, would you recommend if someone was subscribed an antidepressant and that they learn how to taper off of it gradually before they just stop cold turkey, even though they are doing some form of lifestyle change? Yeah.
So first of all, I want to say that I have a nuanced view towards it because now there seems to be two camps, like, people who say, no, medications work and they've been proven. And yes, that's true. And then there's the other camp, people who almost have conspiracy theories towards pharmaceutical industries. And there's some truth in that too. But, like I've seen antidepressant medication saving lives, really, I have. And I've also had clients whom I definitely have not recommended to quit taking medication because they need it, and it's a small population need to take it for the rest of their lives. But it's just a very small population that needs that. Otherwise, if you have more severe a case of depression, definitely take medication, talk to a psychiatrist, find the right medication. And here in Holland, we have a standard, take it at least for a year, but also follow therapy. And then, in accordance with your therapist, you can discuss, am I ready for it? Can I try tapering off my medication? But usually after a year, you can kind of review that. But always do it under the guidance of a doctor. Never do it alone.
Yeah.
And if you do it, make sure your lifestyle is okay. Because, if you start tapering off your medication and you drink a bottle of wine every evening, that's going to be a tough one, because alcohol is depression-inducing. Like, it induces depression. So first, make sure your lifestyle is okay, that you exercise enough, you don't drink too much alcohol, you eat healthy foods, a lot of vegetables, less refined sugars, all kinds of stuff. So my book is also written for people who want to taper off their medication with their doctor, and then look at what kind of lifestyle changes they want to make.
So there are different types of therapy, obviously. I think that one possibility for a lot of people is they may have some form of depression, and they just think, I just cannot be bothered to, I'm depressed. I don't want to get up off my couch. I don't want to go to a doctor. When do you know that it's time that you really need to go and see someone?
Hopefully my book is going to be translated in English or, even Spanish, because there's a test in my book. And there's several tests you can find. There's a test you can take with a doctor, most likely, where you can check how severe your depression is. That's one way. Another way is just really to check with yourself, how disabled am I right now? Can I still do my work? Can I still take care of my kids? Can I still, do I still like the things that I used to enjoy? And if you don't, that's definitely a sign that you probably should check with your doctor. And if you have this one or a couple of days, it can happen to anyone. That's not what we call depression. If you have that for 2 weeks in a row, then you should definitely call your doctor, because the sooner you treat your depression, the better the prognosis of a treatment will be. And also, we go to the doctor when we have the flu. We go to the doctor when we have a wound or something. Try and see your mind and your mental health the same way. If something is not right, doctors are for that too. Doctors are not just there for your physical health; they're also there for your mental health. So take that seriously. Yeah.
So you've based all of this story basically on what you've experienced yourself. Did you have a form of depression, do you think, because you were hearing depressing stories all the time?
Oh, no, this was before I became a psychologist. This had to do with some personal circumstances, but you could call it reactive depression, but it kind of, it didn't disappear the way it should disappear. So that's when my parents, I was pretty young back then, got worried, and I decided to talk to the doctor. But when I look at my job as a psychologist, it doesn't. I mean, it gets to me. Obviously, I can be touched by the stories, but I don't think you can do this job if you take it home with you. So as soon as I leave the office, I let go of all the stories. And
how do you do that?
Yeah, a lot of people ask me that. I don't know. I think so. One of the things, and I wrote a whole chapter about mindfulness, is that what really helped me is mindfulness, and like trying or practicing to stay in the moment. And I think it has to do with that. Like, I talk to a client, and I'm in the moment with that person. I go home, and I'm in the moment going home. So it's kind of like this phrase, "Be where you are." I don't know. You kind of learn that out of self-protection too, and also an important thing. And this has been proven too. And I wrote a whole chapter also about self-compassion, which is really important when you're depressed. Mm-hmm. I think it has to do with self-compassion too, because it's good being empathic, and it's good to be, like, you don't become a psychologist if you don't like people. But you can actually have empathic. Yeah, well, there's some, but let's not get into that. But there's actually a thing called empathic stress, which is really a pitfall for many psychologists and psychiatrists. And actually, that's the reason why they get burned out very often, because they get too involved with their clients and they take it home with them. And the ironic thing is that you really want to help, but after a certain period, you're so burned out that you have to call in sick, and you can't help those people anymore because you're burned out. So empathy is something you really have to regulate. And you also have to give compassion to yourself in order to get charged again.
Well, that's something that I had written down. I have not read your book yet because my Dutch just isn't good enough at this moment. But self-awareness, should it be a priority?
Self-awareness?
Yes.
Yeah.
Are we selfish if we take our own feelings into consideration?
If that's selfish?
Yeah, are we being selfish if we take our own feelings into consideration? Some people are afraid to think about themselves, and then you have the opposite end of the scale where you have narcissists.
Yeah. So what the studies show is that leads to burnout. If you lose touch with yourself, and if you stop checking in with yourself, and you only help other people, that's a recipe for burnout. So, and like I said, it's very ironic because you want to help other people, but you can't after a certain point anymore because you're not helping yourself. So I would turn it around and say it's a must to have self-awareness. Maybe not all the time, but definitely during the day, check in with yourself, see how you're doing, see what your needs are. That's very important, especially in the society we live in. There's so much pressure. There's so many obligations. And you really have to keep yourself in check, because I don't know how it is in Spain, but so many people in Holland get either depressed or burned out. It's a huge problem, and especially youngsters. I work in a practice where we see a lot of depression and burnout. And I would say the biggest population we have now is people in their 20s, which is worrisome.
Yeah, this should be the time of their life.
Yeah, they should be vital. They should be having fun, building up their career. Exactly, it should be the most vital period of their life, and they feel like people who are 70, 80. That's what they literally say to me. Like I feel like. I feel like I'm old because they're so tired all the time.
Why do you think that is? Is that because of the society today? There's too much going on, internet, the stress. Children really aren't playing out in the streets like they used to.
Yeah, I really think that plays a part. Like people start their careers pretty young here in Holland. Maybe they finish their studies at 23, then they get this high-profile job somewhere, which is very demanding, which is okay. I mean, that used to be the case 20 years ago as well, maybe. But then there's all these other demands in their private lives too. You have to look perfect. You have to seem very happy. You have to be fit. You have to even a healthy lifestyle can be a stressful thing, because you have to really show other people that you're living a good, healthy life. And then you even have to show that on social media too. So there's like this, we used to have a working life and a private life, and now we have a working life, a private life, and a digital life too. So we're running 3 lives at the same time, and they all have to be perfect. And humans are just not capable of doing that all the time.
No. And there is no such thing as perfection, but I guess I'm kind of old school. I prefer to be out in nature and live life, but we have to go back to the basics.
We really do. That's why I wrote a whole chapter about nature too, and all the benefits of nature, which are amazing. If you talk about natural medicine, nature is one of those. A big part of the book I wrote actually in nature, and I rented a cabin in the woods every weekend. I was so surprised. I was living in the middle of Amsterdam, and it was so surprising to me how amazing I felt every time I was there, taking a run in the morning, breathing in the forest air. And that's been proven too, is that your cortisol levels drop dramatically if you walk through nature for just 30 minutes. It has such amazing health benefits. And coming back to the youngsters, the people in their 20s, during the weekends, they also have to go to parties. They have so many social obligations. They don't even have time to go to nature. So they're just staying in the city, and they drink alcohol. They don't get enough rest, and then you come Monday at work, and you're totally tired because you just had a weekend. That shouldn't be the case. The weekend should be really a chance to blow off some steam and to let go. And nature is a perfect way of doing that. If you plan to go into nature every weekend, maybe just for 30 minutes, that will probably dramatically improve your stress levels.
Okay, that sounds like it's simple enough. How are we going to get these young people? How are we going to change the society and get them outdoors more and to meditate and be in nature? What are you working on to
Yeah, so I think a huge part of it is education. My book is full of tools and practices which you can apply, but also there's a lot of just scientific information. And what I noticed is that when people know why they should do something and what actually happens in their brains and in their bodies, that actually is a strong motivator to do something and to keep doing something. Whilst if you just tell someone, go exercise during the day, check in with your mobile phone less often, that usually doesn't do the trick. If you, however, tell them exactly what happens if you check your mobile phone too often or when you don't exercise, then usually there's a much stronger motivation. So that's why I think education is a big part of it. And obviously my book is written for adults, but I think that should start with children, actually. There was a kid calling in on the radio this week and had an amazing question and actually asked, why do we get lessons in biology in school and why do we not get lessons in mental health, like how to stay mentally healthy? Like why, and I would translate that, why not teach children how to meditate? Why not teach children how to go about with negative thoughts about themselves, about their environment? How do you teach children to regulate their stress? I mean, children are really, really stressed. A burnout usually doesn't start when you're 25. A burnout usually starts when you're young, when you're a child, and that's a long process, and then eventually you become ill. So if we can somehow avoid that by already teaching children how to really take care of themselves mentally too, I think we can avoid a lot of problems.
I agree with you 100%. I think we should just get rid of the algebra and just do more creative visualization.
Yeah.
From the elementary school on up and learn to relax. Talking about substantial side effects and all from having not only a form of depression, which can cause migraines and gastrointestinal issues and all sorts of things, it kind of brings me to post-traumatic stress disorder. Do you deal with that as well?
So I treat that too. There's a slight difference because usually post-traumatic stress disorder comes along with depression, but post-traumatic stress is really characterized by certain symptoms, like being very agitable, having nightmares, having flashbacks, So it really has to do with the traumatic experience. So the treatment for PTSS is slightly different than the treatment for depression. But when it comes to lifestyle, I mean, obviously, when you have post-traumatic stress syndrome, it's important to get treatment first, like EMDR, which is almost kind of like a hypnosis kind of technique. But after you've had that treatment and you feel, a bit more stabilized, then improving your lifestyle is a very good way to avoid relapse and to stay healthy. But yeah, there's a lot of overlap, and there's also a lot of evidence pointing that depression, in many cases, involves some sort of mild trauma or neglect during childhood, or so very often that's a part of it. For instance, we used to think that depression could be purely a genetic thing, but now we know that yes, you can have a genetic predisposition, so kind of like a sensitivity to depression, but that only comes out when it's triggered by outer circumstances. And this has been proven by people who were in a war-like situation, and they've checked like who were the people that actually developed PTSS, depression, and those kind of symptoms. And very often they had this genetic sensitivity, but they also had trauma because of the war, and that's what can trigger a certain genetic predisposition.
I see. But as you say, it overlaps, and still lifestyle helps improve in that dramatically. So lifestyle, this is talking about food, supplements, exercise. What else?
What else? There's a lot of things, but so there's a lot of small daily habits which you can change. Checking your phone less often, maybe not directly improves your mood, but it definitely improves your cognitive abilities, because they are very much disturbed by checking your phone. And if you look at depression, that involves actually cognitive problems. Your concentration becomes less. Your awareness becomes less. You get a foggy mind, and that can worsen through checking your phone so often. Then also is the case that people look at their phones late at night, and these LED screens, they emit blue light, which actually resembles sunlight. So your brain thinks, well, it's day, so let's suppress melatonin, which is the chemical substance in your brain that actually induces sleep. So, there's all these kind of like daily hacks you can apply. Don't check your mobile phone at least an hour before you go to bed. So sleeping hygiene is very important. Substance, if you drink too much, really cut down on your alcohol. Stop smoking, because smoking has an effect on the brain too. Your sex life, I wrote a lot about that. And sex is a really big pillar of happiness and mental health. But it can also be the other way around. If you have an unhealthy sexual life, or you have a sex addiction, that obviously can create depression. Find healthy ways of relaxing at night. Netflix can be fun, but if you binge watch Netflix, that has actually been shown to worsen mood. And then I have a lot about exercise, because exercise is just such an amazing way to boost your mood. I have a lot about meditation, mindfulness meditation, a lot about compassion, like how to create self-compassion, but also how to practice compassion towards others, because I think the downside of a self-help book can be that it's all about the self. And that's part of the problem when you're depressed, is that you're already too busy with yourself all the time, just in a negative way. Yeah. So it can be very relieving to actually help other people. Go do volunteering work. There's this, compassion meditations that you can do where you wish beneficial things to other people, and that has been shown to actually create happiness in people.
Yeah, what about talking? Is talking good as well?
Oh yeah. So social contact is super important, which is one of the daily habits I describe in my book. The problem now is that a lot of the contact we have with other human beings is digital, which is okay. It has been shown that has benefits, but if you compare that to the face-to-face real-life benefits, it's almost non-comparable. The benefits of actually meeting another person face-to-face is much stronger than talking to someone on WhatsApp.
Yeah.
So it's now, a problem with youth as well is that they mostly talk through their phones, and that's a worrisome thing because people are made to have face-to-face contact.
I've also noticed that a lot of times the young people, or not even young people, it's adults as well, apart from the Facebook and all of that, when they're alone, just going from A to B, they've got to constantly be talking or in contact with someone as if they can't be alone.
Yeah. So that's a very good point, because I think there's an art to being alone too. They're constantly connected, but then again they're not, and I think that can create a fear of being with yourself, whilst it can be really healing to be with yourself on an evening and to really check in with your feelings, with your body, how are you doing, maybe do some writing, listen to some music.
Yeah.
It's really important for human beings to be able to be alone sometimes. I agree with that.
It all sounds so simple.
It is. You just said it. We have to go back to very basic stuff. But I tried to explain some very complicated science in order to move people towards doing so. We live in a very complex society with a lot of variables that actually can have a negative effect on us. So we have to look at all those variables and also see how can we integrate or reintegrate very basic elements of life and still live the lives we lead. So, for instance, nature is very important. But if I look at myself, I don't have time to go into the woods every weekend. But there's small things you can do in which way you can still experience the benefits of nature, like have a lot of plants.
Maybe we should start working towards keeping and protecting the nature. That's one way to get rid of depression and somberness and improve the earth.
I 100% agree. That's absolutely where we should start. But I also think it works the other way around, that if you're more in contact with nature, there's actually a research which I describe in my book, that if you actually have more contact with nature, kind of obvious, but you become more environmentally friendly. So you actually become more aware of the environment. And if you're never in contact with nature, then throwing away a plastic bag on the street doesn't hurt as much. Whilst if you know how good nature feels, and if you start loving nature, then you're going to think twice before you throw away that plastic bag. But sometimes it's hard to get these basic elements in our lives. So, but then, for instance, you can have a lot of plants in your house, and have a lot of natural materials in your house. Have more wood, have more glass, have less plastic in your life. This is called biophilic design, and that has been proven to have similar benefits than actual nature.
Yeah.
But actually, being in nature is by far the most powerful way.
Yeah, and several months ago I did a program on biophilia, and no one knew what I was talking about, and they'd never heard the word before. But it is going back to nature and having the kids, I think, back into the Girl Scouts, the Boy Scouts, doing these club things, and there's all sorts of things they can do. Before we run out of time, let's talk briefly about, we've mentioned the book and we've talked about somberness and depression and how you can reverse all of this just by simple means. You also did a television documentary on shopping addiction. That's quite incredible.
Yeah, so I used to work in the field of addiction. And I also just finished a documentary about alcohol usage in dry January. But I do think that both have a lot to do with lifestyle. I mean, if I look at the shopping addicts that I treated in the television program, the one thing they all had in common is that they had a terribly unhealthy lifestyle, which, I don't know a lot of people who have an addiction and have a very healthy lifestyle alongside that. So, and the way I treated them, and that can be seen in the program too, is actually through lifestyle. I went to the gym with them. I motivated them to have a healthier diet, more activities. So, and lifestyle usually really helped them to stop buying so many stuff, because buying was just a way for them to get reward, was a way for them to feel good, because very often they didn't know any better.
And it took them out of the moment, I suppose.
Yeah, it took them out of the moment, but just for the shopping, you mean?
Shopping or alcohol, any of it, actually.
Yeah, but for a very brief moment. That's the horrible, that's why addiction can be such a hell, because it only takes you out of suffering for a very, very brief moment. And the more you get addicted, the shorter that moment becomes. And at a certain point, that's actually the only way to feel okay, is by using your substance, whether that is buying things or using alcohol or snorting cocaine. That becomes the sole source of reward. So the way to treat addiction, first of all, is very behavioral, is that you start applying alternative methods, healthier ways of getting your reward, by exercise, by nature, all these things. So,
I see.
So, yeah.
Bjarne, one other question about the dry January. Did that have any impact, really, on taking a month off of alcohol?
No, yeah. It was amazing. I guided 10 people who drink on a daily basis, including the director of the show, who was also involved in it. And then we all stopped drinking for a month. I mean, I have a beer or wine in the weekend too, so I joined them actually, and it was amazing. You could really see that these people, apart from the fact that they noticed that you can have a really good time without alcohol, all of them reported that their mental health improved vastly, that they felt so much more stable, so much more happier, even more joyful. And of course, these were people who drank on a daily basis, so their brain was heavily affected by the alcohol. But they all said that.
And not only their brain.
Sorry?
I said not only their brain.
Not only the brain. Oh, no. The alcohol basically affects every organ in your body. So it's one of the most devastating drugs, actually. And when I look at my years in drug counseling, I would say it's if you take someone who has been drinking for 10 years and if you take someone who's been shooting heroin for 10 years, usually the one who's been drinking for 10 years is way worse off. I'm not saying to start using heroin because that's pretty devastating too, but alcohol is really, it's quite amazing that something like alcohol is legal and something like heroin is illegal, to look at the effects.
Well, I prefer to be in nature, actually, myself.
Yeah, good choice.
Bjarne, how can people find you? If they want to reach you, get more information, where can you be found?
So my website is bjarnetimonen.nl. I'm going to have an international website soon, so that's BJARNETIMONEN.nl. And then they can also find me on Twitter at Bjarne Timonen. So they can contact me through both ways. I do counseling in English through a secured Skype method too. So I give online coaching and counseling too. So they can reach me for that too.
Well, excellent information. Fascinating stuff. You are giving us the lifestyle guide against mild depression. And I wish you lots of success. And thank you for joining me on the program.
Thank you so much, Stacey.
Have a good evening.
This is Talk Radio Europe.